The ecosystem is effectively here, right? When you think about how do you get to the government aspiration, India has what it takes. And there's two pieces to it. One, you have an install base today nearing 40 gigawatts, second to none. That means that there's expertise here. People understand what it takes to get projects done, understand the wind regime, technology is being deployed. So that's a significant asset looking forward. The second piece is you look at the other segments of the value chain, whether it's on the customer side, the capital being deployed, the manufacturing side, some of the OEMs in the market. These are all big players.
Thank you very much for joining in today and welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us again. We've received over 300 registrations, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and business heads. Many of them are repeat visitors to our webinars again. So thank you very much. It's very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue to the online channels as well. For those of you who are new with us today, the Blue Circle is an exclusive network and ecosystem curated for business leaders to help them manage disruptive times and become future ready. We focus on four fundamental sectors, which are energy, e-mobility, real estate, and healthcare. We also present socio-economic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. In response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series, our digital publication. And in addition to this, you will be very happy to know that we are very soon launching an exclusive digital platform which is curated for leaders, something like the LinkedIn for leaders, wherein it will present you with the opportunity of connecting with leaders just like yourselves. Also house highly curated content on the platform, have meaningful discussions and conversations like we do, and also access to business opportunities in your sectors and the allied sectors which we focus on. So we've begun our outreach to leaders. So those who are interested, please do write to us for memberships in the energy circle. And the topic for today's session is wind energy, COVID impact and way forward. As the world's fourth largest onshore wind market by installations, India had 37.5 gigawatt of wind capacity by 2019. However, project installations was slowing even pre-COVID. Only 2.4 gigawatt of wind capacity was installed in 2019, nearly half of the 4.1 gigawatt installed in 2017. To discuss this, we're privileged to have invited industry leaders and to discuss where India's wind energy industry stands today, how COVID has impacted it, and what opportunities and challenges lie ahead. I will just quickly briefly mention their respective names and designations in the best interest of time. We have with us Mr. Balram Mehta, COO, Wind and Asset Management, Renew Power, Mr. Gillen Sabatia, Regional Leader, GE Renewable Energy, South Asia and ASEAN, Mr. Nitin Sabiki, Vice President, Business Development, Indian Energy Exchange, Mr. Vibhav Noval, Co-founder and Director, Reconnect Energy, Mr. Vikram Kailas, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Maitra Energy. And the chair and moderator for this session is Mr. Pavan Chaudhary, best-selling author, CEO of French multinational and sits on several boards across the country. Welcome, sirs. Thank you very much for joining. Also, kindly note that we will have Q&A towards the end of this session. Some of you already shared excellent questions and they're with our chair and moderator. And now I request Mr. Chaudhary to please chair and moderate the session, sir.
Thank you very much, Siddharth. Just 100 years ago, Lenin said that the Soviet government will move forward on the twin wheels of communism and national electrification or electrification. Communism could not roll that well, but electricity rolled. But in the coming century, this engine of electrical enterprise is getting a new driver, which is renewable power. And we do not need to speak about the various reasons why the world is moving towards renewables. But coming specifically to wind, let us discuss today what is it that is driving the wind sector, what are the speed breakers, and what is the way forward. Let me begin with Vikram. Vikram, what do you think are the main tailwinds, the stimulants for the wind energy space? Vikram.
Thank you, Pawan. Good evening, everyone. So there are primarily 5 tailwinds for the wind sector and renewable energy as a whole, but primarily for wind. One is, of course, the technology has evolved quite a bit over the last 7 or 8 years since we started the company, which essentially has meant that the cost of energy has come down over time. So we would sell power wind at about 5 rupees a unit about 7 or 8 years ago. The same unit of power today is viable maybe in the 3 rupees 50 paisa range, and with solar, of course, tariffs have hit much lower prices. So the technology has evolved quite a bit. The onshore technology primarily, so where the generation has sort of increased by 50 to 80%, but the cost has not increased, in the same sort of ratio. Of course, the big tailwind, of course, has been the PM himself. I think when he came into power in 2014, one of the first initiatives that he announced was 200,000 megawatt of wind and solar power in India. It was unthinkable at that time. So we literally had about 10,000 or 20,000 megawatts of these assets. So the PM was speaking about 10x in about 6 or 7 years' time. And since then, there's been tremendous support from the government. That's one of the reasons why we grew from probably like 20,000 or 30,000 megawatts to close to like 80 to 100,000 megawatts of installed capacity at this point in time. The third aspect has been the how do I put it? The willingness of the customers to buy more intermittent power because they are acting more as asset managers now and combining different sources of assets and generating power. Fourth, of course, is the banks that are willing to fund this sector. These are the 4 primary reasons that has brought the sector into limelight and into center stage. 10 years ago, nobody knew that this could sort of be a business when we began, but now I think it's mainstream.
Great points. Technology, customer willingness, investor support, and PM, of course. In fact, I had the opportunity of having a 2-hour meeting with him earlier this year, and his understanding of the entire end-to-end technology is amazing. Yeah. And I hope that is also emulated in his bureaucratic team. Plus, the fact that the geostrategic calculus will be changed because of renewable energy in the energy security game is also something which is pushing it from the government sector. Great points, Vikram. Let me come to Balram. Balram, what would you like to add to the tailwinds?
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I think Vikram has spoken everything, but I think energy security and the longevity of PPs, whatever we are supplying gas on date, we are signing PPs for next 25 years. So a kind of fixed price, green power availability for the next 25 years, that's a plus point. And especially if we talk about India's wind sector, the kind of the robust and very reliable supply chain whatever we have in India. That's another plus point.
Excellent.
So I just two points were to what
No, no.
Vikram has just said.
Yeah, great points. In fact, the energy security, the green premium, or the push towards green, and the indigenous supply chain as compared to solar, it is far more indigenized as a supply chain. Gilad, what would you like to add to the tailwinds, the stimulant piece?
Sure, and hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me. Look, I think Vikram and Balram have made some good points. I would just add that the ecosystem is effectively here, right? When you think about how do you get to the government aspiration, India has what it takes, and there's two pieces to it. One, you have an install base today nearing 40 gigawatts, second to none. That means that there's expertise here. People understand what it takes to get projects done, understand the wind regime, technology is being deployed. So that's a significant asset looking forward. The second piece is you look at the other segments of the value chain, whether it's on the customer side, the capital being deployed, the manufacturing side, some of the OEMs in the market. These are all big players. We're talking pension funds, sovereign wealth funds on the financing side. You're talking large MNCs. On the manufacturing side, we have 10 gigawatts of manufacturing capability in wind today that can execute projects. So that ecosystem is well developed, mature, and it's made of big players waiting to get started. So it's just about unlocking that potential.
Yeah. So not only the PM is the wind beneath the wings, the investors have come in, the big companies have come in. Great points. Nitin, what would you like to add to that?
All right. So thank you for having me in the discussion, and of course, relevant point made by the earlier panelist. And so I think the good thing is that everybody in the ecosystem is actually very excited about this thing. So for the last decades, we have seen renewable has taken the front seat with respect to government push. So that's a very positive thing. And also, there have been a lot of expertise or the capabilities that we have developed internally and learning from the global experience. So that's helping us a big time. Coming specifically to the market related aspect, and the market have actually opened up. So just happy to share with you that very recently India got its first dedicated green power market, and there's no close parallel of such contracts, such markets anywhere in the world, where an exclusively dedicated market for green power is there, where buyer and sellers trade the green attribute also alongside the electricity. So I think we are moving in the right direction. So that's something which is very promising. Of course, there are multiple preferential treatment waivers extended, which makes it a lot more viable. And the good thing is that the whole ecosystem is now, and then the policymakers are thinking on those lines of adding renewable in a more structured, in a more market-related manner. At least they've started thinking on those lines. So I think that's a very positive sign. The very recently conducted round-the-clock bidding is one such example of what the future has to offer. It's just the beginning. We'll find a lot more market-linked thing, the way it is happening, and globally, all the renewable rich states, countries like Germany, US, and other countries, we have seen the kind of approach they have adopted to make sure that they add this much of renewable. I think we are also heading in the same direction. I think that's a very promising sign.
Great. So I think you club your point with a point made earlier, where the customer is willing to buy his energy requirement from various sources now. And similarly, the market is willing to supply and trade and exchange energy. So that's a great point. Vibhav, what would you like to add as the last man, but very important person because you're coming in the slog over?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think the one other point I'll add to what everyone else has said is that the nature of the industry and the wind industry itself has also changed dramatically over the last 10 years or so. We saw a lot of wind installations, say up to the year 2010 perhaps, which was driven primarily by tax incentives. So the government of India offered a big tax break if you put up wind turbines, and the investor therefore was typically, let's say, a textile mill or a very successful other business, which would do this as an additional financial investment. What has now changed is we have a completely different set of investors, and Renew and Mitra are perfect embodiment of that. They have very professional, large investors, large pension funds, large banks, and they are also very professional asset managers in that sense. And the manifestation of that is a typical wind investment has moved from, say, a 10 or a 20 megawatt to perhaps a 200 megawatt site or a project. So we have seen a 10x growth because of the change in the nature of the industry, and that's helped a lot. And that is, I think, going to continue to drive growth as we go forward.
Very good point. Serious investors have come in who are not only chasing some tax break, but are dedicated to into this sector, and also impact funds, etc., have come in because of its attractiveness to them. Great points. Coming to the speed breakers or the challenges or the headwinds, Vikram, what are the main headwinds for the sector?
Sure. I think I should, I should start off by saying that how far we have got so far was also unthinkable about 5 or 6 years ago. I still remember sitting in Vigyan Bhavan when the Prime Minister announced that we are going to do 200 gigawatts, and here's the plan, here's the action, here's how we are going to do it. There are a lot of naysayers. But my point was only one thing, that, okay, if not 200, even if we achieve half of it, that is almost like 5x growth from where we were in 2014. And I think we are somewhere close to that, or will probably surpass that by 2020, right? I think so. In that sense, the government also has been working extremely hard to ensure that we get to our goals, and we have larger goals and achieve those as well. But we are stuck in a system that is, it's neither good or bad. It's not I'm not trying to pass any judgment here, but power is a concurrent subject in the country, right? So every state has its own, desires. Every state has its own strengths and weaknesses. Every state has timing of when this needs to be done. And power is sort of a hot election topic also for most of the states. So I think for us to get to the next level, right, and we've accelerated from the first gear to the third gear, but probably accelerate to the fourth and the fifth gear, one of the most important things that we need to sort out is the regulatory aspect of the sector, whether it is honoring contracts, whether it is implementing the projects, whether it is a lot of regulatory cholesterol that needs to, like, we found a solution for GST, which is a very, very core subject to the states. We need to find some sort of solution for power as a sector also. So to take it to the next gear, there is unlimited capital available in Europe, where it is negative interest rates, unlimited capital available in the US, East Asia, where we are seeing the green assets demand a huge premium, and the ESG funds and all of that. There's just absolute, Gilan can probably vouch for that. There's absolutely no lack of capital. And we have some of the best quality investors that are there in the country right now, are willing to deploy more capital. But the challenges that come up in India are primarily related to regulation. Clarity of regulation, clarity of contract, implementation of contract, a firm policy. I think these is something that we need to solve at a global level. I'm aware of a few other things, but I don't want to take away from some of my colleagues here, so I will probably stop here and let Balram and that.
I'm sure the other points will also come, and many of them will pop up from this regulatory basket.
Correct.
So basically, you're saying that regulatory clarity, regulatory predictability, center-state coordination, many issues which come at the federal or at the local level, these are the main headwinds. Balram, what would you like to add to those?
So, Pawan, I think regulatory, Vikram has covered it. See, if you, like from regulatory, if you see, there is a will from PMO, from MNRE, from center side. But, and again, I'm like disclaimer, these are my personal views. Say it looks like sometime that there is absolutely a mismatch what center is planning to do and what states are understanding. So whatever the dream of PM, I should say, or a dream of MNRE, the concerned minister, honorable minister, everybody is trying to push, but then it's becoming difficult for states to understand that why somebody is pushing it. Energy security, green component, longevity of PPs, etc., etc. Everything becomes secondary. But then the states have to understand, and we are facing issues in many states. And like independent of political alignments, we are faced issues in like the same party ruled governments, which is centrally ruling party or non NDA's government also. We have faced issues. And major issue is the land. So the land is again like electricity. Land is a pure state subject, and the land allotment, land issues, land policies, say wind projects, you can't do it in like 5-6 months. Somebody has to find out the proper place where the wind is there, and then if somebody has to do the physical measurement for 2-3 years, then somebody has to block the land. Somebody has to develop the land. It's not that you go and install the machine everywhere. The roads have to be built. The hundreds of kilometers of EHV line has to be constructed. Everything takes time. But suddenly, like you have done half the races you have run, and then suddenly you are finding there is a change in the policy. Right. This is point one. So there has to be some kind of agreement as far as land allotment is concerned, especially to renewable projects. The second point which I want to highlight is the kind of support we get from the state government. That sometimes we are facing most of the projects, if you see in last 5, 6, 7 years, they have suffered only because of the right of way local issues. It's not that we are going there and grabbing the land. It's through legal available mechanisms. We are finding out the land. We are paying the due price for it. But then the local issues, the transmission line issues, most of the projects have been delayed by years because of all the local issues, the involvement of local politicians, I should say, and administration not able to help. So that is the second major issue which we have faced and which have delayed the project. And so rightly said that as far as central government is concerned, they are fully committed. So there has to be some kind of understanding. One more thing which I want to highlight, especially in the wind, out of 35 or 30, around 37.5 gigawatt, whatever is installed today, more than 30 gigawatt is around 28 gigawatt is with the state PPAs. Now, as we are totally dependent on state discoms to make that payment for 28 gigawatt of the PPAs which we have signed. And there's no harm in saying that in some states, even after the change in government, the PPs have been challenged. And in as far as payment is concerned, I shouldn't say it on the open forum, but then there are many states in the country where we have not been paid. BMIS as a renewable IPPs have not been paid for the last 12 months. Now, whereas we have to keep those plants in operation, we have to ensure that plants are running, we have to make the salary, we have to make payments to the bankers, but we have to get the payments. And that payment, like overall, if you see in even a Prapti portal which has been started by Government of India, huge, the crores of rupees are balanced. And so health of discoms is also a matter of it's a worrisome factor for all of the IPPs because of the old PPs. 28 gigawatt is not a small amount.
Yeah.
So those all are the I should say, the headwinds which the sector is facing as on
It's
date?
quite a bunch. The coherence between the center and state in terms of policy, in terms of awareness, in terms of appreciation to promote this sector, then local issues and land acquisition, setting up the transmission lines and power purchase agreements, PPAs getting challenged, and IPPs, the independent power producers, are also having a rough time, at many places. So, let me come to Gilan here. Gilan, what would you like to add to the headwinds?
Yeah, those are all very good points. But I think, at the end of the day, the disconnect is simply that we operate in an entirely government-run market. The government touches every single piece of the value chain. Yet the capital being deployed is entirely private or near entirely private. And so there's a disconnect between the expectations of that capital and what the government has so far been able to deliver. And I think, if you just do the math, next 10 years, power sector needs some $600 billion to be deployed between the power plants that are retiring and the new additions. Half of that is going to be in renewables. That capital will only get deployed if there's a predictable environment in which to do so. If you take our example as a manufacturer, we take investment decisions today on technology, on industrial footprint, whether to expand the factories, hire more labor, etc. We do that 3, sometimes even 4 years before the project is commissioned. The project themselves have, an 18-month to 2-year gestation period. So those are medium to long cycles where capital needs to be deployed in a steady environment. And against that today, I think Vikram mentioned it as well as Balram, but we don't know. We don't know what our costs will be because we may have safeguard duties. We don't know if we're going to be able to execute our projects in the timelines we've committed to. We don't know whether our contracts will be respected. So I think those risks start piling up. And when you're an investor and you know that capital can flow anywhere, you look at India and the wind sector and you think whether your money is better spent elsewhere. And given the needs of this particular market to attract that capital, I think that level of stability and predictability going forward is indispensable. So I think for me, that's clearly the headwind we're all facing collectively.
Yeah, excellent point. What you're saying is not only predictable regulatory policy, you want a predictable tariff policy also. So it should not so happen that in the neighboring solar sector, the safeguard duties came up and the entire deployment got stalled, and the whole sector got stalled for more than a year and a half.
And just at the risk of being a bit provocative, I would say if you look at our last year, we thought we'd do 4 or 5 gigawatts of installs. We've done less than half of that. That in and of itself is not the worst news. If we knew it would be half, everybody would have kind of adjusted footprints, capital allocations, etc. It's the unpredictability of expecting 100% and getting 50.
Yeah, and then the contracts will have to be respected, given the exchange losses as well as prospect of or specter of safeguard duties. How will you protect the prices which you quote? Great points. Coming to Nitin, what would you like to add to the headwinds piece, Nitin?
All right, so point well covered earlier, but I think I would reinforce a couple of points that the first thing is that how we are treating in renewables, why we see this reason. Because renewable is no more a niche segment. It is no more a minor in the overall energy basket. So it is started to become a major contributor to the energy basket, maybe next couple of years. So, and we have operated on a subsidized or a preferential treatment model. So that may work well if you want your renewable to be 5, 6, 7% of your total energy basket. I'm talking about the energy terms, not the capacity terms. However, the moment it crosses 10%, or the moment it crosses more than that, we are eyeing 22%, 25%, and maybe 40% in the time to come. I have my own reservation to what extent these states can actually bear that kind of a preferential treatment, because a flexibility to one means a rigidness to the other party, which as the earlier speaker mentioned, that it is more or less to do with the states. So there's a limit to which the state can incorporate. I don't see there's a difference of understanding. What the center directs, and there's no difference in the understanding. It is the incorporation of those beliefs. They to some extent only states can incorporate. So at some point of time, the level of saturation will come, and we've seen the resistance coming now with respect to CNI customers. All those renewable transactions in the banking provisions being challenged by the state, reconsidered by the state, renegotiation of the PPAs. Maybe I think that's something which is acting as one of the biggest headwind. And on top of it, we rightly mentioned about the inconsistency between the center and the state with respect to policies, RPO compliances, and also so far, we've been talking about it. Indian market is driven by RPOs. It is a compliance-driven market. We cannot expect people to buy renewable on a voluntary basis, though we have some commitment by some industrial houses on RE100, but predominantly this will come as a compliance measure. It's not a voluntary measure. So I think we need to have a robust, structured, standardized compliance monitoring system, which unfortunately we lack. And that's the reason we have not seen the kind of compliances in the past that it should happen.
RE100, as the most of the people in the audience would know, are this 100 companies which have decided to go 100% renewable, and they are getting good applause, international applause for that. Coming back to Vibhav. Vibhav, what would you like to add to the headwinds?
I think I'll probably reiterate 2 points very briefly. One, what Balram mentioned, but I'll put it maybe more strongly, is that essentially the end customer, which is the distribution company, is a bankrupt or close to bankrupt entity in the country, and that is maybe with very few exceptions. That's true for all distribution companies, and what we see as the problems are essentially symptoms of that fundamental problem. So like Balram mentioned, projects which are haven't been paid for the electricity generated for 12 months or more. It's even more for some states. That's a huge problem. PPAs being renegotiated, that's a huge problem. But all of that is a symptom of simple fact that the distribution companies are bankrupt, and there is not enough being done to reform that, or not enough being done with enough urgency to reform that. So that's one major challenge, and the simple business fundamental here is that when the end customer is bankrupt, the whole sector behind suffers. Investors suffer, manufacturers suffer, vendors suffer, startups like us suffer as well, when the sector itself is stressed in that sense. The second point is what Nitin mentioned about particularly about RPO compliance. I think RPO is a very significant piece of legislation. It comes from the Electricity Act itself, but has never been actually properly implemented. But in more recent years is actually being diluted. I mean, recently Ministry of Power diluted RPO provisions for captive power generators, and many states have adopted that. So instead of actually seeing strengthening of the regulations that drive renewable offtake, we are seeing dilution of that. So this is the dissonance not only between center and state, but between different parts of the center having one very aggressive policy or targets, on the other hand diluting the key provisions that enable that as well.
No, great point.
Yeah.
So when the customer is bankrupt or financially challenged, we need to really find some reform there. It could be privatization, or it could be a mix of several other things. I remember when the airline industry was born, that it was almost simultaneously that the aircraft industry was born. But aircraft industry realized that aviation industry, airline industry, is too nascent and too fragile to afford such expensive purchases. So they brought in ways to finance, or let me say GE in the healthcare space, where it sells CT scans and MRIs for crores of rupees, when it finds that somebody cannot afford those, it comes with a service through GE Capital. So maybe we have to look at various modes of how to bring up the renewables purchases about.
Absolutely. And one major discom reform that has been talked about now for 5 or 6 years, including by the Niti Aayog quite forcefully, is also doing direct benefit transfer in the electricity subsidy scheme. India is the only country where essentially a corporation, an independent corporation, provides subsidies, right? That's a whole different topic, but that also could be a fundamental change in distribution reform besides privatization. But we haven't seen enough of that, to be honest.
So Pawan, I'll just add one point over here. That is on DISCOM, since we are discussing a DISCOM. A scheme was brought with the name of Uday around 5-6 years back, and very well appreciated. But then we got the payment. We were very happy because of Uday. We got there were some structural changes. We got the payment. And again, now we are waiting for the next. So now this COVID relief, and in the name of COVID, DISCOMs were given soft loans. We got the payment. But what is the sustainable? These whatever actions are there, those are not sustainable actions. So every year we have to wait for something, some kind of support which will be given to DISCOMs, and finally we'll get the payment. And it's like it has become an exercise now. After every 6 months, we get together and find out ways and means to get the payment. This is point one.
Yeah.
The second point on headwind, I thought somebody else should touch it. That is on, whether we like it or we don't like it. Wind is a risky segment, like it's a risky sector. So we have to be very clear as far as resource assessment is concerned. This year is the best example. This year, the wind was 40% lesser than the last 30 years average. And it has like the total budgets have gone haywire. And no doubt, this is one of the event which is statistically it happens like once in 100 years or more than 100 years. But then it's very, very, very important to do the kind of assessment, especially the resource assessment. And it's better to be a little bit conservative in that. There's no logic of just for the sake of having the project to take those kind of assumptions which are difficult to finally justify later on.
No, very good point. You are also pointing the searchlight inwards towards the industry as to where technology has to become more reliable, where the estimates have to be a little more conservative, looking at wind pattern changes or the risk of those. And also, what do you think about patents? There is one point which comes up that the patents are too strongly protected, and which let me bring that elephant in the room. Okay, what is your take on that, Balram or Vikram? And Gilan, of course, this ball will come to you finally. Go ahead.
Frankly speaking, as I think Nitin told, when the industry was born, it was a very, very small taxation incentive-driven industry. The guy was sitting in Delhi and having a plant in Tamil Nadu. Nobody has ever visited the plant. Nobody has seen the machines. But now, then IPPs were born, and then the total concept changed. Instead of 1 or 2 machines, now we are discussing 300 megawatt, 500 megawatt, 1 gigawatt we are discussing. So the total mindset has changed. The focus has shifted from those tax incentives to performance. How can we ensure that we sweat the assets and get maximum out of the available wind or solar? So the total mindset has changed. In this scenario, there are certain practices which have not changed. When OEM was offering a machine, let's say in 1999 or 2000, he was offering the complete package. OEM was finding out the site, OEM was doing the wind assessment, OEM was taking the approval, OEM was finding the land, OEM was giving you the machine, OEM was installing the machine. And after that, since the customer was sitting in Delhi, and then OEM was offering the comprehensive operation and maintenance also. And since investors' main objective was somehow to get those tax benefits, so he was also not bothered whether the machine is performing optimally or not. Now the mindset has changed. Now with this change in mindset, we, especially the big IPPs, are finding it difficult. No doubt, I'm not blaming the OEM; they are taking care. But as far as the contractual like mechanisms are concerned, those are giving time-based availability, whereas we are looking for the generation-based availability. My machine, why should my machine stop? Because if the machine stops 1 hour in low wind season and 1 hour in high wind season, if my losses are 10 times, right? So the expectation has become different. So now in this scenario, we are looking for some performance improvement exercise, which we sometimes find difficult to implement, because these machines are highly IPR protected machines. So even if we have to discuss with the OEM, then OEM will discuss with the designer will discuss with the HO. By the time we discuss and everything agreed, there is a new change in the system. So that kind of, I think the mindset has to change. It's the kind of, if there is a scope of performance improvement, OEM should we very happily discuss. Okay, boss, come implement and let the industry take advantage of that.
What do you say about that, Vikram? Would you like to add something to that, or shall we take the ball directly to Gilan? Because Gilan is the biggest producer of innovations in this sector worldwide.
Right. No, I think this is a large industry and it has the potential to become way larger than what it is. Right. And in this process, I think everybody has to partner, whether it is OEMs with the IPPs with the government, or the OEMs with the government, or the public at large, or DISCOM. So everybody has to work in tandem. Only then the chain will sort of be stronger and there'll be more reinvestment and growth possible in the sector, right? And like people say, the weakest link is as strong as the chain is, right? That is something that we should keep in mind while checking the growth or sustainability of any industry. So I think the partnership is sort of lacking in certain aspects in this business. At some levels, the partnership is lacking because of the 3C issues. Though people want to do certain things, they understand certain things, they don't want to do anything because of 3C. That's a big problem in the country. It's an advantage and a disadvantage. The chain is not linked up. For example, this bankruptcy law, which is very good, but it's not an evolved system, right? Like somebody alluded to, if the state doesn't pay you for 18 months, right, then how can you declare that company bankrupt? It doesn't make any sense. In any part of if you go to US or Singapore or any Western developed world, they will say the state doesn't pay, you pay up. Certain basic issues, are supposed to be taken care of in a bankruptcy law. They will not even admit that. They'll say first pay and then, we will sort of see, right? I think these are all evolutionary in nature, but one of the easiest things that sort of can be addressed is the relationship between the IPP and OEM, equipment manufacturer. I think that definitely needs to be strengthened. I'm sure Gilan will say there are certain things that are needed from our side also, but I would strongly say that we need a lot more from their side than what we will need from our side.
That's very well put and very friendlily put. So what is your response, Gilan? There have been cases where an industry was just forming, like the automobile industry. When it was just forming, there were 300 manufacturers of automobiles. And then that time there was huge level of collaboration, sharing of patents, sharing of spare parts, sharing of orphan customers. Some companies used to go bankrupt, so their customers used to switch to another company. You would remember Volvo gave its very strong patent on seat belts just for free to everybody to promote safety. Recently, Medtronic, which is your largest competitor in the healthcare space, gave away its patent on open sourced its ventilator. So what is your view on this, Gilan, keeping in mind that you are the biggest holder of IPRs in this sector?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I mean, the plain answer is, and this is not specific to GE or Wind, anybody any company pouring tens of millions of dollars into research and development, naturally they'll want to protect that investment. So I mean, that's kind of the headline news. But I think the point that was made earlier is one where the partnership model is changing, and I think we've had a lot more discussions with our customers in the last 6 months around risk reward and where is the risk best placed? Who can manage that risk better between an IPP or an OEM? And I think those are the discussions that really actually create value, because there's no point on putting a risk somewhere where somebody actually is poorly placed to make decisions on managing it and probably doesn't even understand the risk reward equation. So I think those are some of the things we're getting better at. But we're quite open-minded. At the end of the day, we have examples in our aviation business. We have joint ventures to develop products. We've done it in wind, where we've partnered with financial investors to do co-development and looking at royalty sharing. So the IP ecosystem at GE is quite open at the end of the day. And there's one thing that's clear is that the historical risk reward allocation is dead. I think Balram alluded to it, where you used to buy a one-stop shop from an OEM and not worry about it, and you'd have your Excel and say, I'm going to just hope that the reality matches it. That's out the window. So today it's a real discussion around where's the risk across the project. Should you take it? Should I take it? Do I get paid enough to take it or not? And those are much more healthier discussions.
No, excellent point. Excellent answer. And while you were answering, I was just thinking how China has handled this issue. And that is, of course, a route which I think we cannot take. And I'll tell you why. China has brought in standards in most of the areas, China-specific standards for products, in most of the areas where they wanted access to IPRs. This was an underhand way, because when the China-specific product was made, it was not so strongly protected by IPR as the mother product. So then it could be more easily violated. That is not our intention, and nor will our democratic and more fair play oriented government would do that. But this kind of a collaboration between agents who try to pin very clearly where the risk reward equation should be is a good way forward.
And I would add that one of the the best safeguards against any abuse of dominant positions through IP or other means is competition. And today, I don't think anybody could argue that the wind sector, particularly in India, is one of the most competitive in the world. I think it's probably the single place globally where you have domestic champions, large multinational, and to some extent the Chinese OEMs as well. It's second to none. No other market has this level of competitive intensity.
Oh, agree. I think the climate is just right, and we need leaders like you to come and share. Of course, protecting the final outcomes through the right positioning of risk reward. So great. So let us begin this time with Vibhav. Way forward, Vibhav. What would you like to say?
Well, I think there is, in terms of way forward, I think one, we should recognize that as somebody early on mentioned, that the wind installations over the last couple of years have fallen significantly, and something needs to be done, I would say urgently. And in my mind, the big thing is distribution company reform. We talked about that. That absolutely needs to come in. We can't, like Balram said, we cannot push the envelope again on down the road, or we can't push the problem down the road by doing another Uday or another COVID liquidity relief. It has to be much more fundamental. That's on the larger side. I think specific to renewables, one thing which I believe should happen, use the COVID crisis perhaps, but shut off a lot of coal plants. There are lots of really old plants. Some research we did found that there are many plants which are more than 50 years old, which are still operational. These are polluting. They have, they are close to cities, and they have basically outlived their life. And that, by shutting that off, will create enough space on the grid to enable renewables, or much larger investment in renewables, which is already cheaper than coal. So there is really no economic reason to continue with these legacy projects, like really old projects which sit within the state governments or state generating companies, and that the space needs to be created to get a lot more renewables into the system.
Great point you're making.
Mm-hmm.
And suppose it can be done in an inclusive manner, inclusive innovation. For example, in US, when chlorofluorocarbons were to be phased out, the companies which are getting hit were DuPonts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So DuPonts were given a special research grant to create substitutes for chlorofluorocarbons, so that the potential loser because of this change also becomes a potential beneficiary.
Right.
So maybe these coal-based plant operating manufacturers, operating companies, should be brought into the renewable space through some attraction by the government. Great point. Coming to Balram, way forward.
So, rightly said, the DISCOMs, we need to look into that. So somehow we have to ensure that wind takes the center stage. Because if you look the advantages of wind, first of all, it is available 24 hours. Maybe the PLF can be different here and there. But in comparison to the solar, when the sun is there, the wind is there. Whereas the wind is available 24 hours. So somehow we have to ensure that all bids, whatever happening, wind has a major role to play. So the SAKI, MNRE, the states, they have to find out innovative bids and which are coming. Like for example, if we see RTC, peak power, in which wind has are now RE thermal bid, which is one of the biggest bid, in which the wind has a major role to play. Somehow we have to give this shape of this renewable, we have to make it a firm power. Once we are able to give it a shape of firm power, I think half of our issues will be sorted out. And then the way forward is that, now, for example, we are discussing the thermal plants, but then parallelly, we should discuss the phasing out of the old windmills also. For example, there are very good sites across the country where the PLF is 7-8%, and we are happy. If my father can run the Fiat for 20-25 years, he knew it that it is hardly any efficiency. He's spending more on insurance, he's spending more on repairs, but then also still he was running because he didn't want to. The same is true with the old plants, the old wind plants. At 7-8%, we the 5-6 gigawatt is stuck because we don't have a policy, and it's just like the thermal plants. There is no policy, and we shouldn't blame it to government also, because many times government has asked for suggestions. Nobody is able to come out with a good suggestion where at least we can add the new technology wind plants in that area. And other area way forward to ensure that, because say we shouldn't forget, wind is the if you see in overall renewable, it's like complete made in India product. 70-80% of the components are made in India. It's a highly employment generation sector. But employment is there in manufacturing, employment is there in project execution. The permanent employment is there for the next 25 years when the machines are operating. So on an average, for every 8 megawatt, we have one full-time employment. It can be technician, can be diploma holder, can be engineer, and then can be security guard. So it's a different level of employment generation. So we should also see that if we are able to, if the sector is creating employment, why not to give it its due share? And then important, everybody has to realize that there is a green, whatever we supply to the grid, along with the electricity, unit of electricity, we are supplying the green component. How can we give that due importance to green component? That has to be seen, and everybody has to give the due weightage to that green component. And then coming to the old projects, we have only one option. We have to sweat the sets, whether we want to use the analytics or performance enhancement techniques. We have to ensure that our sets are performing to the best possible extent. And finally, the final solution from my side is, if we can take advantage of, I shouldn't say it advantage of COVID, but then the after effects of COVID, if we can shift the manufacturing hub from some other country to India, nothing like that. I think that will sort out many problems. That will give the volume to OEMs. They can offer the due discount to the IPPs in India, whereas like they can act as a manufacturing hub to Europe, America. So that there's somebody need to look into how can we make India as a renewable manufacturing hub.
Excellent points. I love your points regarding the fact that old windmills also should be phased out, or at least their sweat factor should be improved, because this activity started in 1950s. So we have windmills which go back more than 50 years, 60 years. So great point. And second point regarding the manufacturing piece and how we can be self-sustaining in this, self-sufficient in this is also great, because when I was just remembering that in 1920, Churchill realized that the coal-based ships will not be able to fight the war. He will require oil-based ships. Oil was the new fuel. So he carved out the Principality of Iraq so that his energy requirement is met. Similarly, USA carved out the Protectorate of Saudi Arabia so that their energy requirement is met. China went to Sudan, Nigeria, Russia went to CIS countries. So now the energy cake is changing, and we should also have some bakeries of our own for this cake.
Sure.
And you are saying that wind will be the fastest bakery to make us self-sufficient in the renewable space. Great point. Gilan, what would you like to add to the way forward piece?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of those comments. Repowering one is very, very close to heart, because some of the best wind locations today have the most obsolete technology. It's just nonsensical when you think of the aspiration of installs we need and what's available today that could be deployed if we just had structured policy around it. But maybe the additional piece, or maybe two quick ones. One on the firmness. Yes, there's a lot of experimentation, peak power, RTC, with storage, without storage. At some point, experimentation needs to stop and we need to scale. And I think that's the piece where, we're still in this phase, and investment decisions can't be made on experimentation, at least at scale. So that's one piece. And the last mention maybe is on the corporate offtake market. I think when you look globally at the biggest buyers of renewable energy, these are the corporates. And India, is no secret to nobody, is localizing significant footprints of data centers and other IT infrastructure. And these guys are already buying renewables. So they're already converted to that green buying in the US and Europe. And that's a meaningful segment of the market that's growing today. And I think policy, has to support that. Open access tariffs, giving clarity on land and other things for those developments. But it's definitely, for our overall ecosystem, a good addition to the more mainstream SECI offtakes.
Great points. Great points. Would you like something to add to this, Nitin? Way forward from your side.
All right. So maybe few pointers, quick pointers, short pointers to summarize what I think could be the way forward. The first is we need to have a uniform RPO across the country. So most of the issues pertaining to the inconsistency between the center and the state RPO targets will be taken care of. Then I think if at all we think that these preferential treatment will continue, so that has to be extended to all modes of renewable integration or renewable capacity addition. So far, it is only confined to all those capacities which are tied up under long-term PPA. See, as at the end of the day, you want to add, let's say, 175 gigawatt of renewable capacity. So the developer should have that option that to set up some market link, some CNI customer base, some PPA with long-term PPA with DISCOM. So all those multiple options, I should be allowed to explore and get into, provided there's a level playing field for all these options. So currently in India, we don't have those level playing field. The exemptions are limited to certain kind of transaction. Third is, of course, the innovative products. which Gilan also mentioned about, the corporate PPAs, normally termed as virtual PPAs, one such option. Contract for difference is another option. We have already deliberated multiple times this and at the highest level, where the major issue we have been talking about for the last 1 hour is that this must-run status of the and the DISCOM not in a position to pay for that must-run power, generator getting those back down instructions. I think those concerns can be addressed by a concept of contract for difference, where everything is routed through market. The generator are getting compensated part of their revenue directly to the market, and the balance is only paid by the DISCOM, and the DISCOM is under no obligation to consume that power, and they're only obligated to pay to the extent the generator is not able to recover. I think that would be a very interesting going forward things. The product side, and of course, as we have been advocating for very long, that the role of a developer will change big time going forward. They will no more be a renewable capacity, more of an EPC kind of a thing, and then get into a commercial arrangement. They will become more of a portfolio manager, where they will manage the whole portfolio of having multiple assets, wind, solar, and also, recently the government rolled out this bundling with thermal. I think we should also allow market to be part of it, because getting into a contract which with an intermittent renewable generation and bundling with thermal may not be the most viable one. However, you can always rely on the market-based mechanism, where I can buy to fill up my gaps in just 1 hour's notice. I think those would be thing. And the one thing we didn't discuss about energy security you mentioned, I think, is the cross-border trading, because that opens up a new area where you can actually integrate renewable in a much better manner, because you have the buyers in the other part of the country. When you have surplus of renewable, you can sell to those part of the nations, and you can get it back. And finally, to conclude, I think it's high time we think on those lines of actually making it a self-sustainable model for renewable integration, rather than current practice of subsidized. So that's my individual perspective.
So very comprehensively put. So let me quickly come to the questions. There are still more than 100 people staying with us. That means the panel has really got them hooked. So first question coming from Professor Rajesh Gupta of Indian Railways. I think it's very well answered. What are the drivers of wind energy proliferation? Let me come to the second question, which is coming from Bose Sumantra from Special Project team of MNRE. Would like to learn about the operations and maintenance challenges and opportunities for wind farms in India. Let me take this to Balram. Balram, quickly, operations and maintenance challenges and opportunities for wind farms.
As I told, especially in India, the difference in the European or American and Indian market is there is no end service provider. Whereas in the European market or the US market, there are many independent service providers. So the job of manufacturer is to just manufacture the machine and installation, and then after that is being taken care by some independent service provider. So that is a missing component in Indian sector. As far as challenges are concerned, so that is being filled in by OEMs. They are doing their job very well. So they are supplying the machine, erecting the machine, as well as they are doing the comprehensive operational maintenance of the machine. But again, as I told, that there is a mismatch in the expectation, and there is a whatever they are performing. So most of the IPPs, they have started now looking into how to take over the operation maintenance of those machines, and it's like very, very mutually convenient, because we are not expert as far as technology is concerned. We means IPPs are not expert as far as technology is concerned. So technologically, still we will be dependent on them. We don't want to develop the supply chain also, because there's no logic of developing supply chain for your 1-2 gigawatt if they have already developed a supply chain. So it's a kind of as Gilan also told, but wherever they are strong, we should take that advantage. Wherever we are strong, we should take that advantage and try to see. But yes, the slowly OEMs handling the O&M, that concept is a little bit changing. The IPPs are coming forward and taking over the operational maintenance. And challenges are like common challenges, local issues, technical. I know we have the control on the local issues, and then grid curtailment. Those are the normal challenges which we have seen in the sector for the last 20 years.
Very well answered. So Sanjay Pradhan, Company Secretary, Dasami Labs, wants to know what is the minimum amount of investment required to establish wind power energy for domestic purpose? Coming from a consumer perspective, this question. Let me take it to Vibhav.
I think, I mean, the capital costs are well known, but I think from a consumer perspective or from a person who owns an industrial or operates an industrial unit, I think the better way to look at it is how are you able to source wind power rather than invest. And the reason I say that is that the scale of renewable investments has changed and the mode of investing has changed. So typically the minimum that one looks at is say 100 megawatt, 150 megawatt investment. That won't help if you run an industrial unit. It's better to look at sourcing that power from one of the large producers or from the exchange as well. So I think slightly different answer, but the yeah.
So no problem. Anybody has an estimate of this? The minimum amount of investment required to establish wind power energy for a domestic purpose, that means dwelling. Anybody has an answer on this?
Especially like rooftop solar, this sector has not developed in India, especially the small wind turbines, and those are not efficient also. And then there is no logic of spending double the per megawatt cost if you convert it to per megawatt cost, and then not getting the desired results. So this is a market which can be explored if somebody is able to come out with a very efficient and economical small wind turbine. I think this is the market which exists in India, which is not tapped yet.
Yeah. So because in foreign countries, I'm told it is about $40,000 to $60,000, which is a big capital investment, and and it takes many years to pay off. Fine. So last question to Gilan. Will India look at the vertical axis wind turbines also? This is coming from Head of Development and Operations, Solar Association, Elstan Fernandez. Gilan. Vertical axis wind turbines.
I think the short answer is no. And again, we've looked at a number of different design concepts in both our onshore and offshore business. And at the end of the day, it's about one KPI, which is levelized cost of electricity. And today we don't see anything better than the current technology of turbines to achieve the lowest cost of electricity. And it's not even a close race. So yeah, answer is no. And not specific to India, globally. Okay,
great. So very fine questions we have got, and we've got maybe at least 30, 40 more questions. So, and very informed questions. So, but I will pass it on now to Siddharth because we are already well beyond our time. Siddharth.
Thank you very much, sirs. Our leaders and I have taken home excellent nuggets from today's conversation and very well moderated, Mr. Chaudhary. I'm still receiving positive messages from LinkedIn and over email. And thank you to our members and guests for staying till the end and for sharing excellent questions. Along with our weekly webinars, we will soon be taking these discussions on our exclusive digital platform, which is specifically curated for leaders in sectors energy, e-mobility, real estate, and healthcare. So whether you would like to engage with us on our expert panel or as learners, our leaders are invited to connect with us for membership to join the Energy Circle. All details of membership are also available on the bluecircle.co. And so thank you once again, leaders. It's been an absolute privilege, and thank you, leaders in the audience, for staying till the end.
And Siddharth, 28 questions here, plus about more than 20 questions which have come on my WhatsApp, etc. And before. So please see that if there is anybody who would like to engage with the leader, and if the leader has the time to answer that question, it will be great to satisfy that curiosity. Great panel and great audience.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rohan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.